In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest or most unsettling experience of your life? When I was around 10, my cousins and I were playing hide and seek at our grandparents' house. Two of us went to go hide while my sister was counting, and we thought that it was a good idea to hide in a crate on the front porch of the neighbor's house. We both crammed ourselves into the wicker crate and had to uncomfortably contort our bodies so that we could fit and close the lid. We waited probably 10 minutes before it got really uncomfortable, and I tried to push the lid open to get out. It wouldn't open. It turns out that when we slammed the lid shut, we accidentally flipped the latch that locked it closed and we couldn't get out. We ended up spending the next hour screaming and crying before my sister finally heard us and got us out. Safe to say I've been claustrophobic ever since. For me, it's when my sister had a seizure in the middle of the night and I hear my stepdad screaming to call 911. She wasn't breathing. She pulled through, but just the suddenness. She's had seizures before, mostly hallucinatory, a few where her muscles go twitchy and she flops and twitches, but so far that's the only one where she literally stopped breathing. That was 7 years ago. I still have nightmares of it happening again and me freezing up instead of acting. Not my story, but my dad's. When my dad was young, his father abandoned the family, so it was his Uncle Harry that he grew to know as a father figure. To this day, Uncle Harry is still my dad's favorite relative. Back to when my dad was young. He can still vividly recall this. He woke up one night to see a shadowy figure with a brimmed hat standing in the hallway, peeking into his room through the cracked open door. Already scared, he notices a flash of steel, and before he has a chance to do anything, the shadowy figure jumps across the room and buries a butcher knife in his chest. He wakes up again later, and this time Uncle Harry is sitting on the side of his bed smiling at him, tussles his hair, tells him everything is going to be alright, gets up, moves a couple of things on the dresser and walks out of the room. The next morning, my dad learns that Uncle Harry had died in a house fire that night. He'd fallen asleep with a lit cigarette in bed. My dad isn't a spiritual or religious guy, but he will always remember Uncle Harry's spirit telling him that everything was going to be alright. When I was about 15 or so, my best guy friend and I were watching a movie downstairs. It was a funny movie, nothing scary. I was sitting on the recliner and he was on the couch. There was a coffee table with a huge 1970s lamp between us. Midway through the movie, suddenly we hear 3 very loud knocks emanating from a spot directly behind my friend's head on the wall. The sound was intense and reverberated throughout the house. Had a big echoey sound to it. The knocks also made the lamp shake violently, even though nothing was touching it. Freaked us the hell out. We tried to replicate the sound and found it impossible. The wall is solid concrete with nothing but dirt behind it. We couldn't even come close to duplicating what happened. Our electronics also went on the fritz during the event, including the TV changing channels repeatedly. It's been 15 years now and I still have no idea what caused it, but for a while we were convinced that if we dug out that wall we would find a skeleton or something buried. Creeped us out for a very long time. Back when I was living with my parents, I had a big poster on my door of a yin and yang sign. The door was also directly across from where I lay my head down on my bed. So I'm sleeping one night and I roll over to face my bed, and there is a huge, like bigger than my hand, spider crawling out of the black dot, which was now a hole in my door. The spider and I make eye contact and it begins to start moving backwards through the hole, and then I notice there is a man on the other side of the door staring at me from the side. Imagine his face is against the door and he's looking at me with one eye while his head is facing sideways. At this point I stand up and turn the light on, and there I am, now awake, standing with one foot in bed and one hand on the light switch. Used to work the night shift at a gas station. This guy, I'll just call him Mr. Creep, would come in every night and walk around the inside perimeter of the gas station staring at me for an hour without ever taking his eyes off of me. This continued nightly, and I begrudgingly accepted it as the norm. Well, one night I was walking towards the car wash and I hear a voice in the distance yell, "I can tell you've never been to Europe." I just kind of thought, that's a weird thing to yell, and kept walking. But a few seconds later I heard it again, much closer now. I ignore it, keep walking. I then open the door to the outside closet, and inches away from my ear I hear it again. Hey, I can tell you've never been to Europe. So I just kind of look at Mr. Creep without saying anything, because I honestly don't want to ask why. But creepy people are persistent as all holy tits, so he asks again, and I give in, asking how can you tell I've never been to Europe? And he just looks me right in the eyes and goes, because you don't look behind you while you're walking, and then walks away. I quit the next day. When I was a kid, about 8, my dad and my sister left me alone to go shopping. It was Halloween, so I was stuck to the TV watching Creepshow. After they left, my eyes glued to the TV, I hear a noise and turn around and see feet coming down from our upstairs. I hide under the covers thinking this is some god-awful monster from Creepshow. I hear the footsteps go into our bathroom, turn on the bathtub. I'm freaking out, shaking like a leaf. Then bam 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 at the front door, the water shuts off and I hear someone run upstairs and slam a door. The bam 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 was my dad and sister with the groceries needing help and the footsteps. My dad saw the terror on my face, got us in the car and drive us to Oit Grandma's, and he went back. Turns out my aunt's ex-boyfriend crawled into our attic where he had been living for some time. He was gone, only left some blankets and pictures of my aunt. Creepy stuff. I remember laying awake late one night aiming to catch my mother out bringing Christmas presents into our room. I was 10 and ready to break her Santa Claus BS. So I'm laying there when suddenly the hallway light comes on. The bedroom door is opposite me and I'm laying there peeking through a bit of bedsheet, and all I can see is the silhouette of her head peering round the doorway. I'm excited at this point, thinking here we go, showtime, but for some reason she just isn't moving. I keep staring and she is completely still, and what's more is I start to realize her features are odd. Her head was perfectly round and I couldn't make out a single wire of hair on her scalp. At this point, my irrational fear of aliens has now kicked in, and no longer is it my mother in that doorway. Cold sweat covered me and I struggled to breathe under the bedsheet, but fear paralyzed me from moving. After what felt like an eternity, I finally grew some balls and sat up. The head I saw turned out to be my bedpost. I'm going to go for most unsettling. I live on the street behind a main road. I was in bed one night and my window was open. Around 11 p.m. I heard tires screeching followed by an incredibly loud bang. It woke up everyone in my house and I knew immediately there was a serious accident on the main road. I put a coat and shoes on and went around the block. When I saw the scene, it was easy to tell what had happened. A motorcycle had been flying down the road when a car turned onto the main road right in front of it. The car had been rear-ended bad and the motorcycle was pinned against a tree a bit down the road. The passengers of the car were all fine and were sitting on the sidewalk in shock. The woman who was riding on the back of the motorcycle was lying in the middle of the street with her shirt pulled up. She had a helmet on, but it had come halfway off. She was still alive, writhing around a bit in the glass she was laying on. There was blood on her sides and face. I didn't get too close to her, but she was screaming in agony. A neighbor was consoling her. I could hear her saying, "I don't want to die." My neighbor was telling her that God was here and taking care of her. There were no police or ambulances yet, but the small crowd of neighbors that gathered assured me the police had been called. I was so distracted by this scene that I didn't even notice the driver of the motorcycle lying right by my feet. His helmet was still on, so I couldn't see his face. His legs were bent all the way back by his head and he was not moving at all. I wasn't sure if he was unconscious or dead. I had the worst feeling in my heart and in my gut. I felt some type of responsibility to help these people, but I knew there was nothing I could do. The police arrived and got the woman into an ambulance quickly. She survived. As for the driver of the motorcycle, he was dead when they checked his pulse. The police pushed us all back and roped the scene off. They asked us questions, but I had only heard the accident, so I couldn't offer much. TLDR, arrived on the scene of a fatal accident before police or ambulances had even arrived to secure scene. When I was about 5, I lived in the country. I awoke in the middle of the night to loud swears and gunshots. I had recently watched Red Dawn and was thinking that Russians invaded, so I hid under my bed and went to sleep out of fear. I talked to my dad about it and he said a raccoon broke in and he thought it was a robber, so he shot it.